So obviously we've covered this a lot on the channel, but the biking industry is going through a lot of hard times right now, with some brands even closing. And every time we talk about it, there are always these comments of, well, how didn't they see this coming? Well, today we're going to go into exactly why that is. So let's get at it. So unless you've been living under a rock, you know that the biking industry is going through a lot of pains right now, and that is specifically tied to what happened during COVID. If you haven't seen any of the previous videos, the nuts and bolts of this issue is that when COVID hit and everything was shut down, people were looking for a reason to get outside. So when it came to anything that had to do with recreational outdoor activities that you could actually get out and do instead of being locked in your house, there was a massive run on all inventory when it came to bikes, camping gear, boats, you name it. So as you would imagine with a lot of these companies, the spike in demand caused a shortage of product, which made it so they had to ramp up production to actually fill these pipelines, and we didn't really see when this end was going to come. Now, obviously at the end of COVID, all of this demand plummeted. Everyone had to go back to work, all of this free time was no longer there, and then a lot of people that just weren't really interested in the sport, but actually just needed something to do, were no longer customers. So you are hit with this double-edged sword where now you don't have that demand and a percentage of that market just disappears. So that is what starts begging the question of how did they not see this coming? Almost everyone could see the writing on the wall, and that is not exactly true. So we're going to talk about now is how these companies are failing and what might have been happening internally with these companies that created this situation. So first off, let's talk about what the psychology is of actually starting a bike company. In many cases, it is people that are extremely passionate about the sport that want to make their own bike. It's a great reason to start a company because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you are most likely going to fail anyway. It is an obvious stat out there, but the majority of small businesses that start do not make it, and you really need to have that passion that drives you to grow that business when times get hard. So a lot of these smaller companies like Guerrilla Gravity and Revel start off with really good intentions. They're avid riders who want to create a great product for a great community that they're a part of. And that is an awesome reason to start a company, but it can cause some issues when you run into problems like we did with COVID. That is kind of a perfect storm. So what you end up with is a company that has started with limited business experience, but a lot of passion. So when you run into these situations like with COVID, they think they are doing the right thing and they are making the right decision. So what they're doing during these times to meet this demand is to increase capital expenditures, hire more people, maybe get a bigger building. There's a lot of things that are required to meet that demand that they might not see as coming in the near future that might go away. And for a lot of these smaller companies, they do not have the funds to buy this stuff outright. So what they do is they go to a bank and they say, look, we have this many outstanding orders. We know that we can cover the cost of this expansion with the outstanding orders we have. Can we have a line of credit or a loan to actually be able to finance this growth? So then they take that money that they get from the bank that has payments associated with it and interest rates, and they buy the new building. They buy the new molds for the new bike. They expand by hiring more staff. So what they have done is actually taken all of the money from the bank to finance this growth. And they think, hey, we've got the orders in-house. We should be good to go. But when you have a perfect storm like we had with COVID, your situation drastically changes quickly. So first off, when demand spikes like that in such a short period of time, it drastically affects everything in the supply chain. You might have these orders from customers. You might be able to put in these orders with your manufacturing overseas, but so is everyone else at the exact same time. So all of your orders coming in from overseas get delayed. Raw material prices spike, which causes your inventory to be more valuable than it was when you first placed the orders. So you have to increase pricing to cover that undervalued inventory. And then when all of these orders come in late, something happens. Everyone has to go back to work. They no longer need the bikes. So what you're left with is a really overvalued inventory in a market where demand is falling. So now prices need to fall with demand to actually bring that demand back to a stable level. But you can't do that because you have inventory that's too expensive because raw material, labor, and everything else went up during that time. And then you also invested in capital expenditures to support that demand that's no longer there. So what are you left with here? You're left with overvalued inventory that you can't sell for prices that the market's now demanding. And you have this abundance of loans that are taken out to support a growth that's no longer there. So for a while, you're able to kind of float the seas and see if everything's going to be okay. But you're not the only one. You're one of dozens of brands that are caught in the exact same situation. So now you are in a situation that you can't cover the payments on the loans and you can't sell the inventory for a margin that actually keeps you afloat. And that is what's happening with companies like Guerrilla Gravity, Revel, and these others. They are not big enough, like as Trek or Specialized, to actually weather this storm. And they're run by people that were super passionate about their brand, that maybe didn't see the forest through the trees when it was coming to this situation specifically. They thought that they were going to be able to finance this growth and become a bigger company in the long run, when the reality was the demand was not there to support that many big brands to begin with. So this is another reason why you see a lot of these larger companies like Trek, Specialized, Santa Cruz, and some others that are actually run by non-passionate riders. Many of them don't even ride bikes at all. They're more financial people. Now, you can argue that that brings other problems to the industry when you have financial people running companies that are a recreation, more of a passionate brand. But what it does do is let them weather some of these a little bit better because they're on a more financial business run mindset versus a passionate mindset that wants to grow a brand. And typically what you end up with here is this is not a huge issue. We are able to have in the biking industry a lot of smaller boutique brands that people really enjoy riding and supporting when they're mountain biking. But when those boutique brands were faced with unreasonable demand that was not sustainable, they got themselves in a situation that they couldn't actually afford when that demand dropped off. So this is not a new story in life. You see those typical people that win the lottery and actually end up being in a lot more debt after they win the lottery years down the road than if they just would have never won at all. And the reason for that is when you have the amount of cash flow and demand that you are able to show banks, you are able to borrow a lot more money than you would have been able to without that in place. So for a lot of these smaller brands, if they did not have that COVID demand, they would have not been able to take out these line of credits and loans that they were able to qualify for in such a unique situation. And honestly, a lot of these probably still would have been around today if it wasn't for that bubble in the market, and they'd still be operating under the same passion as a small boutique brand versus trying to scale that quickly with a demand that wasn't sticking around. So when you see a brand like Revel be that much in debt as that size of a company, that is how. When you have orders in place that you are showing that you could have future revenue for, it allows you to borrow a lot more money than you would have qualified for in the past. And then when that demand falls, those orders go away, but you are left with the same bills that are in place that finance that expansion. So guys, I want to hear what you think down in the comment section below. Is this something that you're seeing at your local bike shop level even? Hit up the comments, let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to Bike 198 for more videos like this in the future. Until then, on the next one. Thanks guys, see ya.